I still remember the weight in my chest as I stopped in front of the bank in downtown Denver. The building looked intimidating, towering columns, polished glass doors, marble steps leading up to an entrance that felt far too grand for someone like me. My coat was worn, the hem frayed after too many winters, and my shoes were scuffed. I knew I looked out of place. Not a beggar, but not the kind of client people expected to see walking into a place like this. As I climbed the steps, I felt the stares immediately. The security guard by the entrance, tall and broad-shouldered, let his gaze flicker over me with a kind of dismissive judgment. His name tag read Ethan Reynolds. For a moment, I thought he assumed I had walked into the wrong building. The way his brow furrowed said enough. I took a breath, tried to steady my voice, and asked, "Excuse me, could you show me the way to the safe deposit boxes?" The question caught him off guard. He blinked, straightened a little, and looked at me again, as if trying to match my poor appearance with the confidence of my words. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied me for a second longer, as though wondering if I was joking. But I wasn't joking. I had a key in my purse that my mother had left me. A key I barely understood myself. Ethan cleared his throat. "Safe deposit boxes." His tone softened, but I could see the doubt still in his eyes. Finally, he gave a quick nod. "You'll need to speak with the branch manager. This way." I followed him through the lobby, the sound of my worn shoes echoing against the marble floor. The bank was immaculate. Gold-trimmed counters, polished wood panels, customers in tailored suits whispering in low voices. I caught my reflection in one of the glass walls and almost turned back. I didn't belong here. Ethan stopped in front of a heavy oak door, knocked once, and opened it. Inside sat a man behind a wide desk, his tie perfectly knotted, his expression sharp. His nameplate read Charles Whitaker. Charles looked up at me, and the corner of his mouth twisted, half amusement, half contempt. "Yes? What exactly do you need?" His voice dripped with mockery, the kind reserved for people he didn't take seriously. My palms grew damp. Still, I forced myself to meet his eyes. "I need access to one of the safe deposit boxes. I'm Olivia Parker. My mother left me this key before she died, box number 12. He leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. "Strange. I don't recall ever seeing you among our clients." His gaze swept over my clothes, making me feel even smaller than I already did. I swallowed hard, reached into my purse, and pulled out the small brass key that had been burning in my mind since the day my mother passed. My voice steadied. "I have the key. Box number 12. For the first time, his smug expression faltered. Charles leaned forward, eyes narrowing on the key in my hand. He didn't say anything for a long moment, and in that silence I felt the air grow heavier, as though something important had just shifted. Charles Whitaker led me through a set of heavy doors into the secured area of the bank. The air changed immediately, cooler, quieter, almost suffocating with its silence. Each step echoed against the steel walls, and with every sound of a lock clicking open, my chest tightened. Ethan followed a few paces behind, his presence steady, though his expression remained unreadable. We passed through multiple checkpoints until we reached the rows of deposit boxes, each one lined up like soldiers waiting. Charles stopped in front of number 12, his fingers brushing over the engraved digits. "Strange," he muttered half to himself. "This one hasn't been touched in years." He turned to me, clearly still skeptical, but extended his hand. The key. My fingers shook as I pulled it out again. That tiny piece of brass suddenly felt heavier than gold. I slid it into the lock, and for a moment I thought it might not fit, that maybe all of this had been a mistake. But then, with a faint click, the mechanism turned. My heart pounded, so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I opened the small door, and inside rested a single object, a carved wooden box, dark with age, decorated with intricate patterns that looked almost sacred. My breath caught. It was beautiful and heavy with mystery. I reached in carefully, almost reverently, and set it on the table. Charles stepped closer than he should have, leaning forward as if he had every right to see. His cologne mixed with the metallic chill of the vault, and it made me uneasy. "Go on," he urged softly, though his voice had hunger to it. I lifted the lid. Inside, gold gleamed. Rings, bracelets, necklaces tangled together. Earrings that shimmered even in the dull light. A treasure, chest disguised as an heirloom. My vision blurred as tears welled up. All my life, my mother and I had struggled to buy groceries, to pay rent, to keep the lights on. And here, locked away for years, sat enough wealth to change everything. At the bottom, tucked beneath the jewelry, was a folded piece of paper. My fingers brushed against it, but I left it where it was. Not here. Not under the greedy eyes watching me. Charles exhaled sharply, a sound that was half whistle, half disbelief. His eyes darted over the contents, like a man dying of thirst staring at water. He wasn't hiding it, his hunger was plain. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he might snatch the box from me right then and there. I closed the lid quickly, clutching it to my chest. "I'll be going now," I said, trying to sound firm, though my voice trembled. Charles straightened, regaining his usual air of authority. "Of course," he said smoothly, though his eyes lingered on the box. "But walking alone with such valuables, that would be unwise. Denver isn't always safe, Miss Parker. Allow me to provide you with an escort." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed that I should refuse. Yet I was standing there with a box of treasure, and the thought of walking the streets alone sent a shiver down my spine. Before I could protest further, Charles gestured toward Ethan. "Reynolds," he ordered, "you'll accompany Miss Parker to her residence. Make sure she arrives safely." Ethan gave a short nod, professional and steady, though I thought I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. My grip on the box tightened. I forced a small smile and whispered, "Thank you." But deep inside, unease clawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Charles Whitaker's kindness had little to do with my safety, and everything to do with the treasure now in my hands. Ethan walked beside me as we stepped out of the bank, the late afternoon sun glaring against the glass doors. He carried himself with a quiet discipline, the kind you could only learn from years of service. For a while, neither of us spoke. My arms tightened around the wooden box, hidden inside my bag, as though someone might rip it away if I loosened my grip for even a second. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "That was unexpected," he said carefully. "You don't look like someone who would have a safe deposit box in a place like this." His voice wasn't cruel, just curious. I gave a small laugh, one without humor. "I don't look like someone who has anything worth protecting, do I?" I glanced at him, and to my surprise, he didn't deny it. Instead, he simply waited. Something about his calm gaze encouraged me to keep talking. "My mother, Anna." I began softly. She worked her whole life as a custodian. She cleaned offices, schools, whatever job she could find. We lived paycheck to paycheck in a small apartment. No vacations, no luxuries, sometimes no dinner on the table. It was just her and me. I never knew my father, and she never wanted to talk about him. All she would say was that it was better that way. As the car rolled through Denver's busy streets, I stared out the window, but what I saw wasn't the skyline. In my mind, I was back in that cramped apartment. I saw my mother's hands, red and raw from harsh cleaning chemicals. I smelled the faint trace of bleach that seemed to follow her everywhere. I heard her laugh, tired but warm, when I tried to surprise her with breakfast made from scraps. Then the memories shifted. The laughter faded into groans of pain. I remembered her clutching her temples, the headaches that grew worse each month, the dizziness that left her too weak to stand. I had sat beside her in the sterile doctor's office, watching as white coats spoke in gentle but hopeless tones. "We'll do what we can," they had said, but their eyes told me the truth. There was nothing they could do. I had begged them for answers, for medicine, for anything to stop the steady decline. They gave us pills, treatments, empty reassurances. but none of it worked. Every day, she slipped further away. I clenched my hands in my lap, my throat tight. She fought so hard, I whispered, but the sickness was stronger. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened, his steady presence an anchor. I could still see that final night as clear as if it had just happened. My mother's voice was faint, her breathing shallow, but her eyes found mine with a clarity that startled me. She reached for my hand, squeezed it with the last of her strength, and whispered, "You'll receive a gift that will carry you through everything." Her words had haunted me. A gift? I didn't understand. We had nothing. No money, no family, no future. But she said it with such certainty, as if she was entrusting me with more than her life. I wiped at my eyes quickly before Ethan could notice. "I guess that's what this box is," I said quietly, glancing down at the weight in my lap. The gift she promised, though I don't know if I should feel grateful or terrified. The car slowed as we neared my street. Ethan glanced at me once more, and though he said nothing, I could feel the unspoken promise in his silence that he would see me safely home. After Ethan left me at my apartment, I thought the day was finally over. I didn't know that while I sat clutching the wooden box in my lap, trying to steady my breathing, he had already returned to the bank, back to the rigid marble halls and the sharp scent of polished wood. Later, he told me what happened there, and it still chills me when I think about how close I came to losing everything. He had gone back to report, just as protocol demanded. Charles Whitaker was in his office, the blinds drawn, the light dimmer than usual. Ethan knocked, but before stepping in, he paused. Through the thin crack in the door, he heard Charles's voice, low, hurried but laced with greed. "I have the address," Charles was saying. "Yes, tonight. She'll be home alone. There's a wooden box filled with jewelry. Take it, bring it to me, and we'll split the contents down the middle. Don't fail me." Ethan froze. He told me his blood ran cold as the realization struck. Charles wasn't sending him with me to keep me safe. He was setting me up. He had used Ethan to learn where I lived, and now he was planning to send men to steal what my mother had left me. For a moment, Ethan admitted he didn't know what to do. His entire life had been built on following orders. Charles had been his superior, his commander in civilian life. To disobey meant risking his job, maybe more. But then, he said, he pictured me. The way my hands trembled when I first held that key. The way I clutched the box as though it was my last lifeline. He knew what it meant. He couldn't stand by and let me walk into a trap. Ethan stepped back, quietly, forcing his breathing to remain steady. He couldn't confront Charles outright, not without proof, not without risking being stopped before he could warn me. So he walked in casually as if nothing had happened. "You're back," Charles said, eyeing him with that same calculating gaze. "Everything went smoothly." "Yes, sir," Ethan replied, his voice even, but his stomach churned with unease. For the next few minutes, he pretended to go about his duties. Then, with a hand pressed against his side, he grimaced. "Sir, I'm not feeling well. Something I ate. My stomach's acting up." Charles raised an eyebrow, suspicious, but then chuckled. "What? Did the girl feed you something? Cheap food will do that." He waved a dismissive hand. "Fine. Go home. I'll get someone else to cover your shift." Ethan nodded gratefully, though his heart was pounding for a different reason. He left the office quickly, each step echoing like a drumbeat of urgency. He knew he had only a narrow window before Charles's men arrived at my apartment. He had to get to me first. That night, I thought I was finally safe. I placed the wooden box on a small table in my living room and sat staring at it, the silence of my apartment pressing in around me. I hadn't even dared to open the note inside yet. My mind spun with questions, with fear, with a strange excitement about what my mother had hidden all these years. Then, just as I reached for a glass of water, I heard it, the faint scrape of metal against metal at my front door. At first, I told myself it was nothing. An old building like mine always made noises. But the sound came again, sharper this time, a lock being forced. My stomach turned to ice. I froze, my pulse thundering in my ears. The knob rattled. Panic surged through me. There was no time to think. I grabbed the box and held it against me like a shield, backing toward the bedroom, as if that flimsy door could protect me. The lock gave way with a harsh snap. My door swung open, and two men stepped inside. Broad shoulders, hard eyes, movements quick and practiced. One of them grinned when he saw me. "There she is," he muttered. I couldn't move. My legs felt rooted to the floor. One of them lunged, grabbing my arm so hard it burned. I screamed, twisting, clutching the box tighter, but his grip was like iron. "Let go!" I cried, my voice breaking. Suddenly the air erupted with motion. Ethan burst through the door, his presence so sudden it felt unreal, like a soldier crashing into battle. "Get away from her!" His shout shook the room. He collided with the first man, slamming him into the wall. The second one cursed and came at him swinging. The room turned into chaos, fists, shouts, the crash of furniture toppling. My heart pounded as I struggled against the grip holding me. The man pinning me snarled and yanked harder, nearly pulling me off my feet. Ethan fought like a man possessed, years of training pouring into each movement. He dropped one attacker with a hard strike, then turned on the one holding me. For a brief moment, I felt hope, until the glint of a gun caught my eye. The man shoved me aside and fired. The sound exploded in the small apartment, deafening, and Ethan staggered back, clutching his shoulder. I screamed his name, rushing toward him, but he shook his head, teeth gritted, refusing to go down. Blood stained his shirt, but he pushed forward, grabbing the gunman's arm, twisting until the weapon clattered to the floor. With a final burst of strength, he threw the man down, pinning him until the wail of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed against my window. Within moments, officers flooded the hallway, storming inside with weapons drawn. The attackers were shoved to the ground, their hands cuffed behind their backs. I dropped to my knees beside Ethan, my hands trembling as I pressed against the wound at his shoulder. "You're bleeding," I whispered, my voice shaking. He managed a faint smile, though sweat ran down his forehead. "Better me than you," he said through clenched teeth. The police carried the men out, their angry shouts echoing down the stairwell. The chaos faded, leaving only the two of us, the overturned furniture, and the heavy box that had caused it all. I clung to Ethan's uninjured hand, my tears falling freely now. I realized then that whatever secrets my mother had left me, they had nearly cost me my life. And if it hadn't been for Ethan, they would have. After the police left and the apartment grew quiet again, I sat in the wreckage with the wooden box in front of me. My furniture was overturned, glass shattered on the floor, and the walls still seemed to vibrate from the echo of gunfire. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept hearing the snap of the lock, the crash of the door, the sound of Ethan's groan when the bullet struck him. I stared at the box as if it were alive, as if it might attack me the way those men had. Just hours earlier it had seemed like a miracle, a treasure that could change everything. Now it felt like a curse. My mother's secret had nearly cost me my life, and yet if it hadn't been for Ethan, it would have. The thought made my chest tighten. I pressed a hand against my heart, whispering a silent thank you for him, for his courage, for the fact that I was still breathing. But the box remained, its weight pulling at me like a chain. I forced myself to open it again, the gleam of gold almost mocking me. I brushed past the rings and necklaces, my fingers trembling, until they landed on the folded piece of paper I had noticed earlier. I drew it out carefully, as though it might disintegrate in my hands. The paper was yellowed at the edges, creased from years of being tucked away. My mother's handwriting curved across it, firm but hurried. There wasn't much written, only an address in Aspen, Colorado, and a phone number. At the bottom, in her hand, a short line, "You can always turn to them." I read it over and over, the words sinking deeper each time. Who were they? Why had she never mentioned this to me when she was alive? All those nights, we ate ramen by candlelight because the power was cut. Why hadn't she turned to these people then? Why did she leave me in the dark until after she was gone? Frustration welled up, tangled with grief. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I pressed the note flat against the table, staring at the address as if it could answer me. Aspen, a place I'd only ever seen on postcards and television, snow-draped mountains and homes worth more than I could ever imagine. I sat there for what felt like hours, the box of jewels glinting beside me, the note heavy in my hand. Part of me wanted to shove it all back inside, lock it up again, and forget it existed. But I couldn't. My mother hadn't left this by accident. She wanted me to find it. She wanted me to go. I drew in a shaky breath, folded the note, and tucked it into my pocket. My decision settled like a stone in my chest. I would follow this trail to Aspen. I would find the people my mother had hidden from me. And maybe, just maybe, I would finally understand the truth about who she really was, and why she left this gift behind. The road to Aspen felt like a road into another life. I had never been that far into the Rockies before, and as the bus wound its way up the mountain passes, I pressed my forehead to the window and tried to quiet the storm inside me. Snow clung to the ridges, even though spring had already painted the lower valleys in green. Pines rose like silent guards, their branches heavy with frost, and the air looked so pure it almost hurt to breathe it. For the first time since the attack, I felt a fragile sense of calm, and yet the small slip of paper in my pocket burned like a brand. Aspen, a phone number, a direction from my mother, written decades before. When I finally arrived, a black iron gate stood before me, its crest marked with an ornate C. Beyond the bars stretched a long drive lined with aspen trees, their white trunks gleaming under the afternoon sun. At the end of that path sat a mansion that looked more like something from an old European novel than anything I expected to find in Colorado. Stone walls climbed high, gables cut against the sky, and windows shimmered with quiet authority. This was not just a house, it was a fortress of history, and somehow my mother had been tied to it. I pressed the intercom, my hands trembling. A voice, polished, measured, answered. Yes. My name is Olivia Parker. I think this address belonged to my mother once. Anna Parker. Silence. Then a click. The gates groaned open. I walked up the long path, every step heavier than the last. An older man in a dark suit opened the front door, and behind him stood a woman, elegant despite the silver in her hair. Their faces bore the lines of time, but their eyes, sharp, searching, fixed on me. You said Anna Parker? The man asked, his voice low and almost breaking. Yes, I whispered. She was my mother. The woman pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. Oh, Henry, she whispered. She's back. I froze, confusion tightening in my chest. The man stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly. I am Henry Caldwell, he said, and this is my wife, Margaret. Anna was our daughter. The words hit me harder than the gunshot that tore through Ethan's shoulder days before. My breath caught in my throat. My mother, a Caldwell? The Caldwells, one of the wealthiest families in Aspen, known for their vast real estate empire and philanthropy. Margaret guided me to a velvet sofa in their grand sitting room. The fire cracked in the stone hearth, portraits of ancestors staring down from gilded frames. She held my hand tightly, as if afraid I might vanish if she let go. She left us when she was barely 19, Margaret began, her voice soft but soaked in sorrow. Anna was our only child. She had every opportunity, every luxury, but she was headstrong, wild. She fell in love with a man we tried to warn her about. Henry's face hardened. Your father, he said bitterly. He was a drifter, a man chasing highs and empty promises. He had nothing, gave nothing, and yet Anna believed he was her forever. When she became pregnant, he left her, vanished without a word. And Anna, she refused to come home. She told us she'd make it on her own. She never came back. My throat closed. I thought of my mother, the waitress uniform she wore, the tired eyes, the way she always smiled at me even when she had nothing. She had once been a princess in a stone mansion, yet chose a life of hardship for the sake of love. Maybe she feared that going back would mean surrendering her pride. Or maybe she believed I'd be better off never knowing the world she came from. Either way, she carried that silence like armor until the very end. Margaret squeezed my hand tighter, tears spilling now. We searched for her. For years we searched. Then news came, she died. We buried an empty coffin. We thought our bloodline ended that day. But now, Olivia, you're here. You're proof she lived, proof she carried her love into the world. I looked into their faces, faces that mirrored fragments of my mother's. I saw her cheekbones in Margaret, her gaze in Henry. My world shifted on its axis. I was not just the daughter of a struggling waitress. I was a Caldwell by blood, a granddaughter of wealth and legacy. But the revelation was no comfort. Instead, it stirred a deeper ache. My mother had carried the weight of exile, of love betrayed, of poverty and survival, while this mansion stood in untouched grandeur. She could have had warmth, security, family, yet she was left to wither in silence. Margaret touched my cheek. Stay with us, Olivia. Let us know you. Let us honor Anna through you. And as the firelight flickered over the walls, I realized that my journey into my mother's past had only just begun. When Henry and Margaret opened their arms to me, I didn't hesitate. I fell into their embrace, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I had only ever dreamed about. An anchor, a family that wanted me. Their shoulders shook as they cried, their tears wetting my hair, and I realized they weren't just grieving for my mother. They were grieving for the years they had lost, for the silence that had stretched too long, for the chance they had to let slip away. "I'm so sorry," Margaret whispered against my cheek, her voice trembling. "We thought we were protecting her. We thought she would come back when she was ready, but she never did. And now she's gone." I held her hands, fragile and trembling, and for once I wasn't the one seeking comfort. "She never hated you," I told him softly. "She just wanted to choose for herself. She wanted to love freely, even if it broke her. She carried that love until the very end." Henry wiped his eyes, his strong frame hunched with age and guilt. "We should have gone after her. We should have forgiven instead of letting pride win. We lost our daughter because of it, and now we nearly lost you too." That night, they insisted on taking me to the cemetery. Snow dusted the ground in delicate sheets, and the sky above the mountains was a deep velvet blue, pricked with stars. I walked between them, my arms linked with theirs, and for once I didn't feel alone in my grief. At my mother's grave, a simple stone marked with her name, I sank to my knees. My hands brushed the cold granite, and tears blurred my vision. "Mom," I whispered, my voice catching in the frozen air, "I found them. I found the family you left behind, and they love you still." Margaret knelt beside me, her sobs quiet and broken. "Anna, forgive us," she said to the stone. "We should have held you close instead of pushing you away. We should have stood by you no matter what. But we failed, and we'll carry that failure to our own graves." Henry laid a hand on the stone too, his large fingers trembling. "Rest now, child. Your daughter is safe. We'll watch over her. We'll do what we couldn't do for you." The three of us stayed there in silence, our breaths misting in the cold night, our grief mingling together. For the first time, my sorrow felt lighter, shared. I wasn't bearing it all alone anymore. When we finally returned to their home, Margaret cupped my face as though afraid I might disappear. "You're ours too now," she said firmly. "Not as a replacement, not as a shadow of your mother, but as Olivia, as our granddaughter." The word struck me like a bell ringing through the hollow spaces inside me. Granddaughter, family. Belonging. I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. For the first time in years, I felt like I had roots, a place to grow, a circle that would never push me away. That night, in the warmth of their home, I cried again, but not from fear, not from loneliness. These were tears of healing, of something long broken beginning to knit itself back together. And deep in my heart, I knew my mother was watching, her spirit finally at peace. When I walked back into the hospital, the sterile scent of antiseptic hit me like a memory. Ethan was sitting upright in his bed, pale, but smiling when he saw me. For the first time in days, his eyes weren't shadowed by pain. "You came back," he whispered, and my chest tightened. I wanted to tell him that, of course, I came back, that there was nowhere else in the world I belonged more than here, by his side. Instead, I simply sat down and let my hand rest on his, the silence between us saying everything. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm. I brought him books, and he teased me about my taste in novels. We walked slowly together in the hospital garden, his arms still weak, but his spirit unbroken. The doctors said the bullet had missed all vital arteries, but the pain was still constant. He carried it quietly, never once complaining. There was something healing in those walks, the late afternoon light pouring over the benches, the sound of leaves rustling above us. Each step felt like proof that life could start anew, even after betrayal and fear. One evening, he surprised me by asking, "Would you like to meet my parents?" I hesitated, afraid of stepping into a world where I still felt like an outsider. But when his mother and father entered the room, their warmth disarmed me instantly. His mother hugged me as if she had known me for years, and his father clasped my hand firmly, thanking me for staying by Ethan's side. For someone who had grown up believing she had no family, the acceptance in their eyes felt like a gift I didn't know how to receive. In quiet moments, I found myself watching Ethan more than I should. The way he tilted his head when he was curious, the way his laughter lingered a second too long. It all felt dangerously close to something I once thought I wasn't allowed to feel. Love. It crept in gently, not with fire but with steady warmth, until I could no longer pretend it wasn't there. Outside the hospital walls, justice was being served. Charles Whitaker, the man who had tried to sell me out for greed, had finally been arrested. His name appeared in every newspaper headline, the story of his betrayal spreading like wildfire. Police discovered recorded phone calls between him and the attackers, detailing the plan to rob me. The evidence was undeniable. For weeks, I had lived under the shadow of his threats, but now the nightmare was ending. He was awaiting trial, stripped of his position and reputation, while the bank replaced him with someone far more trustworthy. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe without fear. Ethan, meanwhile, was offered a promotion. His bravery during the robbery, his quick thinking even while wounded, had not gone unnoticed. He was to be the new head of security, a position of respect, one that suited his quiet strength. I saw the pride in his parents' eyes when the letter came, but what moved me most was the humility in his. "I only did what anyone should have done," he told me, and I knew then that he would never see himself the way I saw him, as a man whose courage had changed the course of my life. On the last evening before his discharge, we sat together under the hospital's old oak tree. The night air was crisp, and the stars above us seemed brighter than I had ever seen them. I turned to him, my voice trembling. "Ethan, do you ever think about what comes next?" He looked at me for a long moment, then took my hand. "Every day, and in every version of the future, Olivia, you're there." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sorrow, but from the terrifying beauty of hope. For so long, I had carried only the weight of survival. But now, as his fingers intertwined with mine, I realized that my story was no longer about running or hiding. It was about choosing, about daring to step into a life where love wasn't a dream. It was standing right beside me, alive and real. Graduating from college felt like stepping into a different lifetime. I still remembered standing outside the grand steps of Whitaker Bank, shivering with a folder of rejected applications in my hand, my stomach empty, my heart heavier than the snow that fell on my shoulders. And now, as I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, I saw my grandparents, Henry and Margaret Caldwell, wiping away tears of pride. They clapped louder than anyone else, their faces glowing with joy, as if they were making up for all the years they had lost. Ethan stood at their side, his hand resting over his chest, his eyes following me with a pride so pure it made me tremble inside. Life began to move with a gentler rhythm. I accepted a position at a publishing house, diving into stories and words the way other people lost themselves in oceans. Ethan, meanwhile, rose quickly in his career. After exposing Charles Whitaker's schemes, he was promoted to head of security, a role that fit his quiet strength perfectly. We were building something solid together, brick by brick, trust by trust. Our wedding took place the following spring, in a garden filled with blooming lilacs and white roses. It was a modest ceremony by the world standards, but to me, it was a cathedral of love. The vows we whispered felt like anchors tying our souls together. My gown wasn't the most expensive, but it shimmered like the dawn, and when Ethan lifted my veil, I saw forever in his eyes. After the ceremony, Henry and Margaret asked us to join them at the Caldwell estate in Aspen. Standing before the towering windows that looked out at the mountains, they placed a set of keys in Ethan's hands. "This house," Margaret said, her voice trembling with emotion, "is yours now. It was meant to hold family, laughter, and new beginnings. We want you to make it your home." I could only sob as I embraced them, because it wasn't just a gift of bricks and marble. It was a symbol of forgiveness, redemption, and belonging. Not long after, I discovered I was pregnant. The moment the doctor confirmed it, I felt as though the earth itself shifted beneath my feet. Ethan scooped me into his arms, spinning me around the living room of our new home, while Henry and Margaret cried openly, their hands shaking with joy. It wasn't just about a baby. It was about continuation, about healing a broken lineage, about love finding a way to bloom where pain once reigned. As my belly grew, Ethan would press his ear against it, whispering promises of protection and bedtime stories for the life we were bringing into the world. The Caldwells showered us with warmth, knitting tiny blankets, preparing nurseries, and filling our home with laughter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving, I was living, thriving, dreaming. On quiet nights, when everyone else was asleep, I would sometimes sit by the fireplace with the old jewelry box in my lap, the one my mother had kept hidden, the one that held the truth of who I was. Its silver corners had tarnished with time, but its meaning had only grown brighter. Inside, I placed not only her letters and photographs, but also a small golden rattle for my child. It became more than an heirloom. It was a bridge between generations, a legacy of resilience and love. One evening, as the fire crackled and snow drifted gently beyond the glass, I let my hand rest on my belly and whispered, "You'll never know the loneliness I once knew. You'll have love in every corner of your life." And I believed it. Looking back, I marveled at the arc of my story. I had been the girl no one noticed, shivering outside a bank door, dismissed as nothing more than a nuisance. But every rejection, every tear, every heartbreak had led me here, to love, to family, to a future I once thought impossible. And as I closed the jewelry box and pressed it to my heart, I knew this wasn't just my story anymore. It was the story of survival turned into strength, of loss transformed into legacy, of a woman who found everything she had once been denied.